What is up everyone, welcome back to a brand new video on Lex Alexis. Today I'm going to be grading all 24 championship clubs on their transfer windows. Which teams have had an incredible transfer window and which teams have really fallen off the mark with their transfer windows. So as you can see here are the tiers I'm going to be ranking all 24 teams. Perfect as the top tier, great as the second best tier, decent being an average, a semi-good window, lazy being, not that great, and poor not being a very good transfer window at all. Remember, these are my opinions, guys, and I'm going to be interested to know what are your guys' opinions in the comments down below. If you guys like what you see, please give the video a like. It just tremendously help the channel. Let's aim for 20 likes in this video. That'd be terrifically appreciative. Please do hit the subscribe button if you've not done so as well. We're nearly at 950 subs, and of course our goal is to get to 1,000 subs, so we're doing very well with subs at the moment. So if you can subscribe to the channel if you've not done so, that really helps the future of this channel, and please share this channel to as many people as you can. All of that helps too. But without any further ado, let's start ranking all of these championship teams. We start with Barnsley, and I gotta be honest, a team that I'm not having a lot of confidence in right now. Obviously, they lost recently to Luton Town, and actually, a really bad stat with them as well. In their 6 games that they've actually lost in a row, 5 of those games they've only lost by a 1-goal margin. So, agonisingly, Barnsley have never been able to really recover, and they've never taken the lead under Poya Asbaghi in charge. And he's been there for 11 games at the moment, which is very, very disappointing at the moment. The signings they got in, I liked Keena, getting him in from Watford/Fulham. He was with Fulham, but he doesn't really get a lot of game time there. But the people that they lost weren't too impactful, maybe apart from Dominic Freesia, who could have been a really useful option up front. I gotta say, overall, I don't look at this team thinking those signings are going to save them from relegation. So for me, I think they gotta be a poor tier. They needed to do a lot more, Barnsley, to guarantee their championship survival. And for me, they really could have done so much more than this. Next team is Birmingham. Now, this is a lot more like it. We've got transfers going in. Yes, they've used the loan market, but they've used the loan market wisely. You may notice there's a big outgoing here, a huge list in that outgoing area. Truman, Chutsaneka's gone back to Charlton. Cosgrove's dropped down to Wimbledon. Sanchez has gone. Harley Dean's also dropped down to League One to join Sheffield Wednesday. Riley McGree has gone to Middlesbrough. Dion Sanderson to QPR, which is a blow because there's 2 crucial players for Birmingham going to championship rivals. But the players that got in, great signings, I think. Bakuna especially, I think, is a very underrated signing with Onel Hernandez and Lyle Taylor. All 3 of them are working together very, very well and actually produced a lot of Birmingham's latest goals so far. Mengi, I think, will be a good signing, and I think Richards is also a good future signing as well, potentially, if they can get him in permanently. And I got to say, overall, I think, all things considered, with the players that got in, I think it might be a decent ranking. And I'm also going to launch, I think Tav Chon might return, but it's a bit difficult to say at the moment, especially with his injury problems. But I think at the moment, Birmingham have got a decent window. Good job, Birmingham. I think they've actually done quite well there. Next is Blackburn Rovers. Now, what makes a good transfer window? Is it the players they bring in? Is it the amount of money they invest? Or is it when they keep the players? And I think Blackburn have done well in all 3 fronts. They could have lost Joe Rothwell. He was very incredibly linked with Bournemouth and Rangers. They've kept Rothwell in. Very crucial player, one of their most important players this season. They've kept Buckley, they've kept Ben Brereton, Tyrese Dolan. All these players who would have been really heavily linked, they've kept all of them. And they've got Ryan Hedges in from Aberdeen. I've heard he's a bit injury prone, but he can be a good potential player in that midfield. Zfuke, I think, is a good signing with Dylan Markende. Really heard good things about him in Spurs as well. And I think the best signing for me is Ryan Giles on loan. He actually created the 2nd most assists in his time at Cardiff before he managed to recall back to Wolves due to an injury. So I think that's a great signing. And with the players they lost, I don't think it's going to affect the team. So overall, I think their team has improved. And I think that is a great transfer window for Blackburn. They could have improved it even more if they got maybe another striker in and potentially a couple more defenders. But I've got to say, all things considered, it's a great window for Blackburn Rovers. Now, Blackpool's window is interesting because for me, I think it was a little bit quiet to be honest. I think Jake Beasley's an interesting signing. He was one of the most hottest prospects in League 2 with Rochdale. Didn't really quite perform there, and there was a lot of weighted expectation on him, but I think he's one for the future, and I think could be a good signing for Blackpool long term. Charlie Kirk from League 1 from Charlton, he started off with Crewe and then joined Charlton this season, and he's not really had the same success there, but if he plays well like that Crewe side that did get promoted from League 2 to League 1, I think he could be a good signing. I do think that they do get knocked down from a great window that they didn't manage to get Brannigan in from Oxford. They've lost Ryan Wintle, and I think he would have been a perfect replacement if they got him in. So ultimately, it's not a perfect window, but I think nevertheless, with the players they got in, it's a decent window, and they could have lost a lot more players, you know, for the fact that Josh Bowler was heavily linked as well. I think it's good that they've kept him in. So overall, all things considered, some good, some bad. I think it makes an average/decent window for Blackpool. Do I really need to grade Bournemouth at the moment? I mean, with those players, I'd be very surprised if Bournemouth do not get automatically promoted. Defensive reinforcements, midfield reinforcements, goalkeeping reinforcements, and attacking reinforcements. They've addressed every single position on the pitch and have improved it. Even with the players they've lost, the big player for me is Steve Cook, but I think they've got a great replacement in potentially with either James Hill and Nat Phillips, where if Nat Phillips makes his loan move permanent, two brilliant future centre-backs that could have a lot of potential. Laird as well is another defender that does well as well. He can even play left back or like right back. He can play in an all matter of defensive positions as well. Kiefer Moore coming in, hurting a championship rival but gaining from that. Don't think he has a good season, Kiefer Moore, but if he gets the service, I think he'll be good, especially if Bournemouth need to go a bit more direct, and I think they've struggled with that this season when they've had to try and be a lot more direct. Siriki Dembele, brilliant player, and really, in my opinion, Peterborough's best player, so it's definitely affected their season. And Todd Cantwell, I mean, what a lone player to get in, you know, from Norwich to the Premier League to Bournemouth right now. He was unbelievable for Norwich in the Championship last season. I think up there alongside with Buendia as Norwich's best players. So for me, I think this has to be, without a doubt, a perfect window for Bournemouth. You know, I even think getting Woodman in is like a really underrated signing as well. Great goalkeeping reinforcements as well for the future too. So I think Bournemouth have really done themselves a lot of favours, but it can really backfire on them if they don't get promoted. Next we've got Bristol City. Very quiet window overall. Tim Close I think is a good signing, although he's not one of the youngest of centre-backs anymore, so I don't really see him being a long-term option. Ty Baggerson has left to join Ipswich on loan. So ultimately, they've not really lost anyone major. They did have a lot of their players linked. Semenyo was linked. Wells was linked to Cardiff very, very heavily at one stage as well. So they did well in that front. But overall, I think the lack of what they've done with that squad, I still think defensively they needed more than just Tim Close. They needed 2, maybe even 3 defensive and proper quality defensive players as well to improve that. And I would have probably preferred another striker as well. So for me, I think they're going to have to go down for the lazy. Not a poor window, because the fact they've actually kept their players in, I think that's good. But I think they should have done more. Only one signing. You know, Bristol City, just this shows to me their lack of ambition for me a little bit. If they were really ambitious and they wanted to get up there in the table, I think they would have done a lot more than that. So for me, they're going to have to go to the lazy tier for me. Next team is Cardiff. Now this one's also quite interesting for me. Likewise with Birmingham, Cardiff have used the loan market. So if you notice the players that are going, I think Drame is a good signing from Leeds. I think he'll be a very interesting option. Doughty, I think, is a great signing from Stoke and a good replacement for Ryan Giles as well. Hugo as a signing, I think, is really, really good as well. And Ikpeazu, who they got literally right in the last minute for the fact that Kiefer Moore was called by Bournemouth, I think could be okay. And Ryan Wintle, for the fact they recalled him, I think that's great business for Cardiff to do that as well. And with the players they lost, really, apart from Giles and Kiefer Moore, no one really too major. For the likes of Evans, Sang and Kieran Brown, they all need definitely more game time with loan moves. So for me, I think Cardiff have actually done pretty decent job here, and I think those signings could be the difference. Of course, Ikpeazu actually scored the winning goal for Cardiff against Barnsley, so already their signings are paying off, which proves to me I think they've had at least a decent window, but if they can really kick on, could even be a great window. But for now, I'm going to put them in the decent tier. Next is Coventry. Now once again, a very quiet window. Very few outgoings there. 2 of them have been strikers who just weren't getting any game time in Tyler Walker and Junior Da Costa, both getting loan moves away, with Tyler Walker dropping down to the league below to join Portsmouth. I think Bidwell's a good signing. I think he'll give good competition to Dabo, but I do question the necessity of getting this signing in when you've already got a good wide player like Dabo, unless he hasn't been performing very recently. I would have not really been too shy to get maybe a couple more defenders, especially if the likes of Rose or McFadden get injured at any point of the season. And I would have probably liked maybe someone to replace either Sheaf or potentially Hamer and O'Hare even. You know, just think about these players that could be linked very heavily to the summer. What you need is a good potential player who could potentially step into their ranks in case the worst case scenario happens. So I don't think Coventry have prepared for that too well. But they have held on to these players. But all of them have been linked. They have been linked away. So they do deserve credit for that. But however, I think they could have done more. I really think they could have done more, especially that Coventry were dropping down with their form quite recently. If they had a good transfer window, it could have definitely helped their chances of getting into the playoffs. So for me, I'm going to have to put them into the lazy tier. Maybe a little bit harsh, but I think it is very, like, the best in that lazy tier, but just misses out in terms of the decent tier for me. Derby's a very tough one for me to rank because they can't get players in, but it's out of their control based on you know, things going on outside of the board, and you know, due to the difficulty they have in supplying funds at the moment, they couldn't get anyone in there under a fresh embargo. And I think teams have taken the opportunity to try and cherry pick their players with, you know, very good bargains. Graham Shilly leaving for £20,000 is outrageous. You definitely needed to at least 2 zeros to actually get his proper value there. Baldock's left because his contract's ended. Jagielka couldn't extend his contract, so he's left, and he's joined Stoke as well. And David Marshall has left to join QPR. I mean, David Marshall wasn't really involved, but still, it's a crucial player. And Luke Planche for next season as well. But the only positive with that, Luke Planche can still be featured for Derby this season, which I think is still really good. He's been one of the couple of players in Derby's academy who's really stepped out. Planche has done well. Stretton has done well as well. So these players have done really well for Derby in the circumstances. But unfortunately, if I'm looking at the stats, I think they have to go to the poor tier based on the outgoings, the money they got from it, and, you know, for the fact they couldn't get anyone in. But it's a bit unfair for me to do that because it was really out of their control. Next is Fulham. Now, I'm a bit puzzled by this one because they've not made many signings. They got Neco Williams in, Riley in, and it looked like to me that Fulham weren't going to sign anyone. But Neco Williams could be decent. I think he replaces Dennis Odoi quite well, actually. And, of course, they've actually let go of a couple of defenders, Cyrus Chrissy and Steven Sessegnon. But I think for me still, they needed more defenders than this. Defensively, I think it's been their weakest area this season. I mean, I think Marco Silva's not going to really rotate that back line, especially how it has been ticking a little bit more better recently as well. Getting a clean sheet against Millwall as well, I think is a decent result for them as well. So maybe they didn't need too much change. I think overall, I can't give them like a great or potentially a perfect window. They kept their players in, but I think I'm going to give them a decent, just about, with the fact that they got that signing in the end. I mean, you would argue with the effort they should go down to lazy, but I'm not really going to attack Fulham with the fact that they didn't really need to make change. And I'll give the credit that they kept their players in. So in the end of it, I think I'll give them a decent transfer window. Now, Huddersfield have really impressed me in this transfer window. I like all 3 of the players they got in. Jamal Blackman's going to provide good competition for Nichols and goal. Aneurin, I loved him at Chelsea, and I really think he needs constant playtime now, especially at the stage of his career. And I think Huddersfield will do a really good job of him. It reminds me a little bit potentially if Emil Smith-Rowe joined Huddersfield, and look how well he did there. I hope Aneurin has that really good run of form also, because obviously Emil Smith-Rowe right now is doing fantastic things, and I think Huddersfield did well to really project his career. And I really hope Aneurin has that. And Carol Eiting, the return of Carol Eiting to Huddersfield has made a lot of fans happy. He was one of, if not their best player of last season. So I'm really excited to see how Huddersfield are going to thrive under him. And with the outgoings, players that just weren't going to get anywhere near the starting 11, then players that needs moved away for game time. So overall, I might say a great, maybe 1 or 2 more signings. It would have been a perfect window. The difference with Bournemouth was because of the amount of signings they made and the amount of areas they've improved, they get it perfect. But I think Huddersfield still could have maybe have done a little bit more work defensively in their transfer window. That is all I can nitpick, to be honest, but overall, great window for Huddersfield Town. I tell you what, Hull City have completely reversed card their transfer window with the fact they've got new owners in. I mean, look at the signings they made. I mean, Aliyah, I can't say his surname, but getting him for Fenerbahce, I think is a really good potential player. I really like they've actually extended Ryan Longman's stay at Hull and have made it permanent. Ryan Longman being the top 2 best players for me in Hull's season, and the fact that Hull have done well to actually keep him permanently, that is a very underrated bit of business from Hull there. Marcus Force, I think, is a great upgrade to Josh McGuinness, who they've loaned out to Wigan, and Liam Walsh, in terms of midfield cover, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. They've addressed every area on the pitch, improved it, and for me, just like with Bournemouth, I think they have to get a perfect tier. And it's just a shame so far that Hull's form has not been too great recently, but their signings have been actively involved in the good bits of that form. So I think, give it time, I think Hull's signings could really project Hull into really good things. Next is Luton Town. They've had a really quiet window. I mean, did they really need to make a load of signings? I mean, if Luton really wanted to push for top 6, they could have done a little bit more, but I know their budget's not that great, and they have to, you know, consider that. Pretty much the only bit of business they've made is a replacement for Simon Sluga. Jed Steer, I think, is a good upgrade. I actually think he's a very good goalkeeper, quite underrated as well. But a loan deal, though, so they've not got him permanently, so Luton got to make sure that they're aware of that. And they've lost Glenn Ree, and they've got Dean Pereira out on a loan as well. Overall, I think their squad is a little bit averaged out, but I do think they should have done more. I've got to be honest. You know, with the position that Luton are in, they've got so much potential, and I think they're really just missing out just maybe 1 or 2 more players that can really get them to attack this season. And for me, with the lack of investment, I think I'm going to put them in the lazy tier. But likewise with Coventry, I think they just missed out on that decent tier here. We go to Middlesbrough, and this is one of the teams that have done a lot of their business right at the beginning of the window. And that's great, because the quicker they got those players in, the more time they had to settle. And, you know, at this crucial time as well, Middlesbrough's form needs to be right up there, especially if they're chasing for top 6 as well. Riley McGree, fantastic. You know, I think he did well with Birmingham when he had to finish for Taif Chong. So I think he'll do a great job in that midfield position. Connolly from Brighton, brilliant signing for me. He was really involved in Middlesbrough's victory in the FA Cup over Manchester United. And Florian Balogun has already been involved with a couple goal contributions already. So I'm really excited to see how Balogun flourishes as a player. Once again, a bit similar to Anurin. I really want to see him blossom into a really good prospect. Now, in terms of our outgoings, Brown's a bit of a blow. Hernandez, I think, with the fact he had a lot of competition in his position, I think it definitely affected him, but he's a good player they've let go. Same with Vic Piazza as well. Cardiff managed to get him off him, and I think with the fact that Middlesbrough couldn't really find a replacement striker, you know, he's not perfect, but what I will say with the signings that they've got in, I think they, at least for me, deserve a grade. I really like all of their signings, and I think it really does improve the, you know, most of the areas of the pitch. So a bit similar with Huddersfield. If they had maybe 1 or maybe 2 more players that improves more positions on the pitch, then I think they actually would have had a perfect window alongside with Bournemouth and Hull. But regardless, I think a great window for Middlesbrough. Next is Millwall. Now, I'm very struggling with this one because I think the 2 signings they got in, Burke and Freeman, bit hit and miss for me. Freeman has not really been playing too much football, but obviously we know what he can do, what we saw in QPR. Burke, once again, just... he's played football actually, but he's just not really flourished, and he's going to really be a very active part as a striker role, especially as he'll be the replacement of Matt Smith, who has been right up there for their top goal scorers for many seasons, Matt Smith. I don't really necessarily back him to really fulfill that replacement straight away, and I think, I've got to be honest, with Ben Thompson and John Daddy Bavarsson leaving as well, I don't think it's been a really good window at all. I think it's not a poor one based on the players that got in, but I think it's lazy. Personally, I think they needed to do a lot more personally. So that's why I'm going to put them in the lazy tier. Nottingham Forest, very similar window to Middlesbrough. Got a handful of players in and have improved most areas of the pitch. Laria is a good replacement for Asai Tutu, who unfortunately had to go back to Arsenal due to his injury. Steve Cook in centre-back, I think, is a brilliant signing. Surridge as a striker option, great signing. Hanzo, good potential. And Keenan Davies has probably been the most impressive signing for me so far. Of course, he played a major role in Nottingham Forest's victory over Leicester in the FA Cup. So I think the signings they got in are fantastic. They address most areas of the pitch. I probably would have liked them to invest a bit more in that midfield. I think Harry Arter for me is not really the same player than what he was. So I think that's the only setback I'll give with Forest this window. But apart from that, I think based on the signings I've said, at least a great window. If they had a real star-studded midfielder, I think for me, they definitely would have had a brilliant window for me. Peterborough is also quite an interesting window to go over because they've made some signings. They have made a load of signings, 6 loan deals as well, which is the most amount of loans I believe you can get in a single window. But I won't lie, they're players that I don't think are really going to be wow players that will, you know, help Peterborough, escape from the position they find themselves. Bender, I think, is a good goalkeeper. Coulson could have a bit of potential. Morton could potentially be a good potential player as well. The rest of them, for me, I don't really think they're really going to be the players that's really going to take people out of it. And I think what lets them down is that they've lost their best player in Siriki Dembele. He was the one that by far made the most forward passes and has actually made the most dribbles and the most goal contributions as well. So honestly, the fact they've lost a player of that quality and have really not done a really inspiring replacement for him, I think Peterborough for me have got to go to a poor tier, especially that they're really desperate to try and get survival in the Championship, and right now I don't really have a lot of confidence in them. Next team is Preston. Now, I think Preston have been the team I've changed the most, and I've been going back and forth on what tier they should be. They had good outgoings for me. I know they lost a lot of players, but I actually think it was a little bit of dead wood in that squad, so he needed a little bit of a clear out and to get some money back potentially on a couple of those players. And ingoings, they've not done much. They've got Bambo Diaby back after his drugs ban for Barnsley, so they've managed to sign him. But Cameron Archer is honestly the reason that is making me have this dilemma, because his form very recently has been incredible. Scored a winning goal for Preston against Hull City. He was involved in one of the goals for Preston against West Brom, the only team to beat West Brom in the Hawthorns so far this season. Played a very active part in Preston's draw against Bristol City. For the fact that signings having that much impact to a team like Preston that weren't really looking that inspiring going forward, I think for me that this signing has made it at least a decent window. I originally had Preston down as lazy based on the very little ingoings that they've had and a little investment, but I think with how good Archer has been, they're going to get a decent window. This could backfire on me, but I think Preston have done quite well there. QPR is also a very interesting one, and one I've been changing back and forth as well. So they've made 3 signings. David Marshall, I think, is a great goalkeeper. Dion Sanderson, great centre-back. A lot of Championship experience, so he'll definitely fit right in that QPR squad. And Hendrick, I think, is an interesting signing. You know, I've not really seen Hendrick play that much. You know, I remember his stunning goal against West Ham. I think it was last season, actually. And he's been a player just falling a little bit out of favour. Wasn't getting enough minutes. And he could offer something with that QPR squad, but I don't think he's really going to necessarily take them to an upper level, if that makes sense. And I think the outgoings, you know, they're the same, you know, couple of players that need a loan, you know, to get more minutes. Overall, for the fact they kept their players in, that would have been heavily linked to the likes of Willock, you know, the likes of Austin, Gray, all those players that would have been linked. The fact they've kept them all, I'm going to say a great window because they've kept those players in, and I think with the position that QPR find themselves, I think those new signings just complement their squad and they add depth, and that's exactly what QPR needed, and they got it. So fair play to QPR. I think they actually had a really good window. Reading is another team I've had to change all over again. Now, the thing is with Reading, I actually kind of like the signing of Tom Ince. I actually think potentially he could be a good signing, but over the years, especially recently, he's been very hit and miss. And Reading can't afford to have a striker that's hit and miss when they're in the position that they're in right now. They've lost Andy Carroll, unfortunately. Liam Moore has left on loan as well. He was part of the swap deal with Tom Ince. So getting Tom Ince means they lost Liam Moore, and Liam Moore's gone to Stoke, obviously. And Raphael's gone as well. They got Carol Hine as a replacement. I mean, they've just replaced people. And Puskas leaving on the loan as well. They've not replaced him. For me, they've not done enough. And for me, I just don't think the signings are that inspiring. So with all of that combined, I think it's got to be a poor tier. I think if I actually had a good player, it still would have actually been quite a lazy window. But for the fact that Reading are in the position that they are, they needed to do more than this. Next up is Sheffield United. Now, it's interesting again because they've not done too much. They got Davies in, which I think is a good replacement in goal for Robin Olsen. Charlie Good at the back as well, I think is a good signing too. But I think they needed still a little bit more. You know, the fact that they've lost creative players like Burke, Muse and Freeman, the fact they didn't get a striker in, really, you know, I can't get my head around it. You know, they needed another striker in. Ryan Brewster's out for the season now. They needed definitely another striker. You know, if they had got Andy Carroll in, I actually would have said that actually would have been a good signing for Sheffield United. So I'm very critical with the fact they've not got a striker in. So for me, I wouldn't say it's a poor window, but I think it's lazy. I think they should have done a little bit more there, in my opinion. But I'm not going to bash the way that they're actually performing on the pitch right now. And maybe part of it is just to save some investment, but they need a striker in. You know, it's obvious that they didn't do it, so I've got to say it's a lazy window. Now it's Stoke. So we previously talked about Stoke. They got Liam Moore in from Reading. I don't know if he's going to be, you know, impressive. I don't think he's going to start every single game, but he could be a good signing. Now what I love about Stoke is how well the signings are performing. Baker and Theologian Bides scored for Stoke against Swansea City yesterday. The fact that the signings are actually actively involved in pushing Stoke's form up the table is already telling me they've done very well in this transfer window. I think potentially losing Surridge and Doherty could potentially hinder them a bit. I think Ostergaard's a huge blow that they lost as well. So I think with the amount of outgoings and the crucial outgoings they've lost as well, I think they've lost some key players. But having said that, the fact that the signings have really freshened up the squad and they're performing so well, it's at least a great window. Maybe not quite perfect. If they kept a couple of players in, it would have been perfect. But for me, most definitely a great window. Very high, great. You know, very, very close to getting to the perfect tier. Swansea's window is very interesting too, because they've got actually a decent amount of players in. You know, Swansea on deadline day were incredibly quiet, but they actually managed to get Riley and Ogbeta from Shrewsbury, who I have seen actually. I think he's a really good wing back, and I think he'll be a good replacement for Jake Bidwell, who of course has left to join Coventry. And I think the signings as well is intriguing. Fisher from MK Dons I think is a good backup choice goalkeeper, with Cyrus Christie as a fullback. You know, maybe not very sharp, but a load of experience. Hannes Wolf, I think, could be an incredible player. I think he's got a lot of potential, and I already have seen the stuff he can already do. You know, I'm really, really impressed that Swansea managed to pull this deal off. And Finley Burns is another interesting prospect as well. And I think with the outgoings, I think, yeah, a couple of them are a bit of a blow. I think Bidwell and Bender, I think, are quite crucial players that they've lost. But overall, I think it's been decent. You know, I just think it could have been incredible with some of the players that got in, but I do think they're a little bit let down by not addressing certain areas. So for me, decent, but really could have been much better. Final team to talk about is West Brom. Very quiet window. They really only got one position, and now it's their strikers, and that's part of their problem, which is good. Their problem really has been clinicalness. You know, at the back, defensively they've done pretty well, but going forward they've been atrocious. So what did they do? They get Del DK in, but unfortunately for them, he gets injured, and I think he will be injured for maybe even the rest of the season. But the fact they got Andy Carroll in, I think, was a good bit of business from them. You know, probably not the most, you know, attractive in terms of a good replacement for DK potentially, but at least they've actually got someone in. Now, I think with that in mind, I might give them a decent winner. They could have done just a tiny bit more. I think with the players that they've kept in, it's at least a decent, but the fact they've managed to address it, you could argue it probably should be a great window, but due to unfortunate circumstances, I think I can only give them a decent ranked transfer window. So, this is my final ranking of all 24 teams transfer window. If I had to pick my favourite transfer window, I think it would have to be Bournemouth easily. And if I've had to pick the worst transfer window, the fact I don't want to pick Derby because they've been a little bit shafted in terms of what's been going on. So with that in mind, I think it'll have to be Barnsley and maybe Peterborough with the worst transfer windows for me. But that'll wrap it up for today's video. A bit of a longer video, but if you guys enjoyed it, please give the video a like. It does tremendously help the channel. Please do hit the subscribe button if you've not done so. It does really help the channel. And please share this channel to as many people as you can. All of that helps too. But that'll wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are legendary for Sonny in this video. And as always, I'll see you guys very, very soon. Take care, everyone.